Hello, my name is Tomasz Wąs. I would like to tell you about diversity of structured domains via k-Kemeny's course, which is a joint work with Piotr, Krzysztof, and Stanisław. Let me begin with a formal distinction between what I mean by election and domain. So an election, an ordinal election, is an object in which we have a group of voters, and each voter has a ranking, preference ranking over alternatives. So for example, Piotr likes sushi the most, then donut, and so on. And it can happen that me and Stanisław have exactly the same preference ranking. On the other hand, the domain is a much simpler object in which we just have a set of preference rankings that are allowed. And while the ultimate goal of this line of research is to study diversity of elections, in this work we focus on diversity of domains. First, because they are just easier, so easier to analyze, but also it's this concept of diversity which we study is still fairly new, so it's good to test this on something which is well known, something canonical. And while there are not so many canonical elections out there, there are quite a lot of canonical structured domains in social choice theory, so it's good to test what this diversity notion will do for them. And by doing so, we can also maybe learn some new interesting insights into the nature of the domains. So what kind of domains I will be talking about? Well, in our paper, we focus on actually quite a lot of different domains, but here I will be considering three types. First, there is a single peak domain in which the alternatives are ordered in some objective societal axis, and then each vote, each prefix in each rank from a vote has to form an interval in the societal axis. Next, we have group-separable domains in which an idea is that the rank preference rankings of alternatives actually stem from some preferences over the attributes of these alternatives. So each such domain is given by some hierarchical tree of attributes, and in which, for example, we say that all alternatives are split into vegetarian ones and non-vegetarian ones, and then for vegetarian ones, one is a fruit, one not. In non-veggie ones, one contains fish, one not. And the voters each voter has some preferences over these attributes, which will then give us the preference ranking over the alternatives, which we can read from the leaves of this tree under the respective rendering. And of course, different voters can have different preferences over the attributes, so this will correspond to rotating some of the internal nodes of the tree, and in this way, by different rotation, we can obtain all these different rankings, and this will constitute the whole domain. We will be interested in one specific such, particularly interested in one specific such types of trees, which are caterpillar trees, in which every internal node has exactly two children, and at least one of them is a leaf, so an alternative. Finally, we have Euclidean domains, in which we say that each candidate is associated with some point in a Euclidean space, and so are voters, and then a voter prefers alternatives that are closer to them. We will be looking at three types of such domains, in which we sample the candidates uniformly at random from either one-dimensional interval, two-dimensional square, or three-dimensional cube. And then we will consider all possible votes that correspond to any location in the whole space, not necessarily confined to this box from which we sample the candidates. Okay, so these are our domains. Now let me tell you about the diversity that we consider. So we call this measure inner diversity, and it's based on what we call k-Kemeny problem. So in a standard Kemeny problem, we ask for a single ranking that will minimize the sum of the swap distances to all rankings in a given election or a domain. And by swap distance, I mean the number of pairs of consecutive candidates that we have to swap in order to turn one ranking into another. So in this example, ABC will be a solution to Kemeny problem, and the Kemeny score will be 6 because it's the sum, this minimum sum of swap distances. Now, k-Kemeny problem is a generalization of that, in which instead of just for a single ranking, we select k rankings, and we measure the swap distance to the closest one of the chosen ones, and then the k-Kemeny score. So this gives us some kind of clustering of voters based on which of this chosen one is the closest, and the high k-Kemeny score corresponds to some kind of difficulty in the clustering, which is some indication that the election or domain is diverse. Now, Kemeny score is known to be NP hard, even for voters, and this naturally extends to k-Kemeny. However, it's also known that Kemeny is easy for elections that belong to some of the domains that we study. So a natural question is, what about k-Kemeny in these cases? However, it turns out that k-Kemeny is hard for either single-picked domains or group-separable domains, even for k equal to 2, which is the smallest possible k that is larger than 1. For Euclidean domains, it's a bit more complex, but it's also generally hard. However, we also found some nice polynomial time algorithms, when for some domain, for other domain that we studied in the paper. Now, given the hardness, we need some approximation algorithm, but there is a nice local search approximation that we can use, and we obtain the vector of this k-Kemeny scores. Now, in some previous work, we wanted to aggregate this vector into single number in diversity index, but it's not super clear how to do it. So here we will use qualitative comparisons to say what's going on, which domain is more diverse than other one. So now let me present the results. So in this plot, on y-axis, you can see different values of k, and on x-axis, and on y-axis we put normalized k-Kemeny scores. So Kemeny scores divided by the size of the domain. So first we put impartial culture as a baseline. So this is not really domain, it's a sample of all possible votes, and this is something very diverse, so we expect nothing will kind of go higher than that. So the two most diverse domains that we consider are group-separable caterpillar and 3D cube. And since small values of k seem a bit more significant than large ones, we actually, in our ranking of diverse domains, put group-separable caterpillar first, and then 3D cube. This is followed by 2D square, then single picked, and finally the least diverse is 1D interval. So it's worth noting that that group separable caterpillar is like very structured and also very diverse, which for example may motivate its usage in experiments. Finally, I want to tell you about one interesting additional insight we got when we looked at Euclidean domains. So when we look at the same plot, but only for Euclidean domains, we can compare it to plots of for Euclidean elections, so elections, not domains this time, that we sample in a most standard way that is usually done. So we sample votes from the same interval, square and cube, from which we sample the alternatives. And what we observe is that the diversity of elections is actually significantly lower than the diversity of the domain. So how we can explain this fact? When we look, one explanation is that when we look at the space of Euclidean space from which we sample the alternatives and on the areas from that correspond to particular rankings of these alternatives, we see that some of these areas actually are completely outside of the box from which we sample the alternatives. So no matter how many voters we sample from the same box, we will never be able to hit these areas. So a natural idea to increase diversity would be now to actually increase the size of this box from which we sample the voters while keeping the box for alternatives the same. So we tested how the ratio of sizes of these two boxes actually affect the diversity, but it turns out that the highest diversity is when these boxes are actually identical. So what is the intuition here? Well, okay, like if we increase the size of the voter box, we are able to hit some of these new areas, but at the same time, there are these small areas that now have like a very, very small probability that we will find a voter there. So the distribution here is just different than the distribution, than the uniform distribution over all possible rankings in the domain. So to conclude, we looked at inner diversity, we studied its computational complexity in specific domains, so we showed some hardness, some polynomial time algorithms, we obtained the diversity ranking of the domains, and we also got this additional insight regarding Euclidean domains. Finally, I want to advertise upcoming work looking at the outer diversity, so kind of complementary notion of diversity, where we also have lots of interesting results regarding the domains, so stay tuned for that, and thank you for listening.